Of the day, everybody's ending one meeting to go to another. So I think we'll start this session. So welcome to Readers of the Pack, Authors Speak. I'm Linda Mall, founder of Accountability by Design and Readers of the Pack. Um, this is my passion project. I am an avid leadership reader, love learning and love growing leaders. So this is about the perfect mix for me. And Laura shares that love for sure. So a warm welcome to all of you for joining us from wherever you are. And I hope you enjoy our conversation with Sarah. It promises to be very interesting. If you've read the book or even looked at the title, I'm sure it was intriguing. She uses some terms I've never heard before, so that was interesting. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation. But right now, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Laura Haynes.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. So great to see you all today. My name is Laura Haynes. I've known Linda for 20 plus years. We go back a long way, and that speaks to the small business world that we work in. I am a lifelong learner. I love to read all genres of books. When I'm not collaborating with Linda on Readers of the Pack, I am a fund developer with Autism Edmonton. So I have a big heart, as Patty knows. I worked at United Way for supporting people that may not necessarily have the means to get ahead. And so that really speaks to my heart. And that also speaks to my background, which is sales and marketing. And I also coach and mentor small business owners to really make the impact that they want to make. So thank you for joining us today. It's wonderful to see everyone. We are going to welcome your questions for the last probably 30 minutes, Linda, I think is the formula we use. So we'll open it up to everyone because I'm sure you're going to have a lot of questions for Sarah. You can do them live, but also feel free to use the chat function if you're not able to do them live for some reason. We'll be sharing the PowerPoint with you within the next few days, and that will include a full bio of Sarah, as well as information about the work that she does and some of the impact that she's made in her world. I first got to see Sarah during the pandemic, actually, and it was as a result of, yes, results. I was on one of their,
You were on the basement call
yeah,
for
I was on the
four
live.
hours.
So I feel really lucky, like lucky today to be able to listen to
Mhm.
you live again. It's been it's just a journey that you go on and meet people in your life. At the end of the session, we are going to be asking you for feedback. So we'll send a link along with the PowerPoint and the recording to all of you. And please provide us with your honest feedback because we are really looking to our audience to help us, drive what this looks like. This is all about you. This is about our audience. We want you to get as much out of this as you can. So on that note, Sarah is on a mission to really help leaders and build and rebuild teams. You'll learn very quickly if you haven't listened to Sarah that she's a very authentic person, speaks from her heart, speaks from a lot of experience, and I'm sure that's why you've been successful in your business, Sarah. Um, your goal from based on what I know and Linda knows is to empower leaders to understand and honor really the beautiful complexity of the humans they serve. And so through your work as an executive coach, an in-demand keynote speaker, we'd love to see you live in Canada. Come to Western Canada, please.
I love Western
Oh,
Canada.
it's
So
beautiful,
you
you
just
know?
get me on a plane and I'm there.
Okay.
And I accept payment in the form of cheesies.
Oh, Hawkins cheesies?
You bet.
Oh my
Because we
gosh.
can't get
Okay,
them
you're
down
my
here.
girl. Researcher, contributor to Harvard Business Review, and best-selling author of the book that we're talking about today, which is Don't Feed the Elephants. Sarah helps leaders close the gap between what they intend to do and the actual impact that they make. Oh, that can be such a wide gap, and getting there can be very challenging. So we will share all of her contact information at the end of this and following the session. So please welcome Sarah Noel Wilson to the call and to our very small group of our lovely participants.
All
I
women. It's
I
All
best.
love
women.
it. I'm
All
here
women.
for it.
So Sarah, I'll kick off the session with a question.
Yeah.
Uh, Knowing that the time and energy committed it takes to write a book and all of the other hats that you wear, president, CEO, founder of an organization that you're running, knowing what, the time that it takes to write a leadership book of this nature, why did you write this book, and why at the time did it make sense to you to publish at that point in time?
That's an excellent question. I I started my, well, let me rephrase this. I was conscious of my journey of trying to figure out how to move myself and others from avoidance to conversations since about 2008. But if we're being very honest, what I understand now is that this is me trying to interrupt generational trauma.
Right.
As I mean, if I'm being completely honest, which I mean, that's just how we're going to roll. So I have had a lifetime of experience of observing family members, loved ones avoid conversations to the point where they would have consequences to us as a family. The way I lovingly say it is what I learned growing up is that you loved hard, you laughed hard, and when things got hard, you left. And that's how we showed up. And so I was fascinated with this idea of the elephant in the room because everything that I was learning about in my master's was saying, the best teams are the ones where truth can be talked and psychological safety and the elephants can be freed. And I realized that I had never experienced a team like that. And then I also realized I'd never had a personal relationship like that. So that's what really started for me this journey. Why I decided to write it when I did. The the true story is my colleague at the time, Kristen Sauter, who's a good friend of mine now, she's over in Germany, sat me down at 2 a.m. after a conference and told me to write the damn book already. She's like, you keep talking about this book. You keep saying, like, someday when I get this book, when I do this. And I can't do a beautiful German accent, but I just want you to imagine a colleague sitting you down and being like, write the damn book already, Sarah. What do we need to do? So that was the loving push I had. And there was, there were so many ideas, and everyone was like, how are you not writing about elephants? You've been doing this work and crafting this. It felt too obvious to me, to be
Right.
honest. And I don't know if that resonates, Linda, for you or
It does.
Laura. Does it? Where it's like, well, no, that's too obvious of a choice. And yeah, what was interesting though about the timing is the first draft got finished in December of 2019. And as we're revising it, the pandemic hit and the racial injustice hit. Not that it was always there, to be
Hmm.
clear, but it was amplified. And so it was an interesting time to write the book. And I had to be okay that who I was, what I knew would evolve and change by the time that the book came out. And I had to be okay that this was a snapshot of where I was at this point with this work.
Mm-hmm.
That's so
Interesting.
true. Oh my God.
Mhm.
Yeah. Wow. That's so powerful to talk about your family experience and translate it
Yeah.
into the
And I
writing.
love that you love cheesies because
Yeah, me too.
when I was keynote speaking and facilitating, that used to be my treat in the car. As I headed out on the highway, I'd always stop and get myself cheesies on the way home
Yeah.
because it was like, okay, you get rewarded for doing these miles. Yeah.
True
Funny.
story. I always pack an extra suitcase and I literally bring home like dozens of them
Yeah.
because they're so
Yeah.
superior to Cheetos. But yeah.
Yeah. So the interesting part, this is this name thing, names I'd
Yeah.
never heard of. So
Yeah.
you reference several species of
Yeah.
elephants in your book
And
that
there's
I'd
more.
never heard of. So can you describe them and how we accidentally feed the elephant
Yeah.
in at any given time?
Yeah, if it's okay, I want to take a step back because
Sure.
there's lots of books written that are fantastic books on crucial conversations, radical candor. There's amazing books and trainings that are out there. And what I realized is how many times I was working with clients and they would say, "We went through the training, but people aren't having the conversation."
Hmm.
And so for me, I became interested in how do we help ourselves realize when we're fearfully or aggressively. The book was very much written about fearful elephants, but that's evolved now because that can come from a very, like it can show up very
Hmm.
aggressively. How do we help people even recognize that they're avoiding the conversation to begin with so that they can then take those steps? Because if we aren't able to notice when we're avoiding, and to be clear, I'm not an advocate to say everything needs a conversation, but I want it to be a conscious choice if you're going to engage or disengage, that it comes from a place of power instead of feeling powerless. And what's fun about this is our thinking about this work has evolved so much and it's deepened so much that I'm like, oh, I want to write the book again. What I know now. But it's okay. I'm working on the second one. It'll be an evolution. But so the type of elephants was formed from a desire to help people see patterns of behavior more clearly so that they can name it and make a choice. The cheekiness of the names is because I've learned that in some situations, especially when we talk about an elephant in the room, the risk is high. There's something at stake, which is why we're avoiding the conversation to begin with. And how do we give people a little bit of lightness to hold on to something that's difficult?
Hmm.
The goal of light language was never to be dismissive around lightheartedness, but not lightweight, is what I would say. So, for those of you who aren't familiar, I always introduce it as here's some very scientific terms. So the avoidant is the main genus species, right? So the avoidant is like the ultimate, it captures everything. And then we have our little subspecies. The blameophant is where we spend more time blaming, being critical, instead of having the conversation we need. The imagophant is where we spend a lot of time imagining something without testing our assumptions. Let's see, what were the ones in the book? The deflectophant, where we deflect, the nudgeophant. Those are some of the ones. And then what's been really fun is we've invited people to come up with and share. And so we have things like the sarcastophant, how we can use sarcasm to deflect from a conversation. My favorite came from a farmer, and he called it a pretendophant. He said, we just dug that hole, we put gravel over it, we put the problem in there, we put a picnic table, and we pretended like it didn't even happen. Um, the optimism, where you just go, I'm optimistic it's going to work out, but I'm not going to do anything to help it work out. And then other ones like the gaslight event, the grenade event, where people will throw a bomb into the conversation and leave, right? Like, so this is where we're looking at the continuum of the intensity. And what we've found with the language is that it can make it safer in some situations for people to recognize and go, "Oh, I'm feeding a blame event right now." And it's not as judgmental. And it helps them step into that conversation differently.
Hmm. Yeah. So you also stated that when I'm going to read this because it's a quote, when we don't know anything or
Mm.
think we know everything, we lose curiosity.
Yeah.
Can you give us a high level explanation of the three steps you recommend for freeing that elephant and specifically the role of curiosity?
Yeah. I mean, that comes from, I'm not going to be able to quote the research, But basically, there is this point of when you know too much, you're not as curious because you think you know more than you do. And if you don't know enough, then you don't know what to ask even. And
Mhm.
so there is this like middle part, this sweet spot. The thing that I observed in my former position in HR and leadership development is that a lot of people would be in a situation where they would be frustrated with someone, but they didn't know why. They didn't know what was underneath it. So they just knew they were mad at them or frustrated at them or they were being difficult. I observed that people had a difficult time considering other people's perspective, which makes sense because when we're in that stress response, we're in protection mode. And, and curiosity lives in our highest functioning part of our brain. And so my three-step model is we call it the curiosity first approach. It's not a one size fits all. I always tell people don't believe anyone who tells you just do this and you can have all sorts of conversations because everyone's different, every culture is different, every relationship, every moment is different. But it is a good set of tools to have for a lot of your conversations. And so the first step is just getting curious with yourself. And when there's a conflict in a relationship, it's always because there's a need that's not being met, or a value that's being stepped on, or a value that's not being honored. And so part of getting curious with ourselves is being able to get clear about, well, why am I struggling right now? What is this? What's actually at play? What need is do I have that I'm not getting met, even if it's at work or in this situation? How am I feeling? What's my perspective? And if we want to get really courageous, what role am I playing in contributing to this? And the thing that I don't think I was as effective in articulating in the book is that you can free an elephant and never have a conversation. The elephant in the room is created by the avoidance. And sometimes just getting curious enough to go, oh, this actually has nothing to do with Michelle. She just reminds me of this person I don't like. Like, poof, then the
It
elephant can be
happens.
freed, right? And that happens. And so then the second step is to get curious about the other. And and this is a nuanced one because getting curious about the other person is not about filling in their stories. It's not about making assumptions. It's also not about prioritizing their needs over your needs, as I say this to a group of women, because a lot of us were culturally conditioned to sacrifice ourselves for other people. Remember, those of us who live in the Midwest, for my friends in Canada, we're not twins when it comes to culture, but we're definitely cousins
Mhm.
when it
Mhm.
comes to the like culture of niceness.
Yeah.
There's a lot of similarities. And so but the idea of getting curious about the other person, it does a couple of things. It humanizes the other person. It reminds us that they have a perspective. It reminds us, um, that they have needs, they have feelings, and it also can give us some insight into how we might have that conversation. Because that's probably the number one question we get is how do I start the conversation? Like I just don't even know how to start it. And often when people take time to genuinely get curious about the other person, it might be, oh, I wonder if they don't feel heard in this. Or I could see how they might feel like I didn't give them the information that they needed. And you could start the conversation with, hey, I don't know how you're feeling, but, like what I was thinking about is this. And I wonder if we can have a chat about it. Um, and then I always lovingly say when your curiosity hits a wall, and if the elephant hasn't been freed by that point, then you try to get curious with them and how to have a conversation instead of a confrontation. And that's something also where our work has evolved of like what's the framework of how we can start those conversations and how we can show up. So curious with self, curious about the other person, and then curious with them. The other thing I want to say about the getting curious about others is that is the place where sometimes we've seen people unintentionally with the best of intentions weaponize. And here's what I mean by that. Um, I was working with an HR person and they were really frustrated because they're like, she just won't get curious about the situation. And I was like, well, help me understand the situation. Well, here she was bringing a complaint about harassment. And I was
Mhm.
like, well, we're not going to ask somebody who's a victim of harassment to get curious about their abuser. Like, we need to be careful about when we use that and when that's appropriate. So that's in a nutshell. Because what we have found is that when we can take the time, we can get clearer about our needs or we can get clearer about questions we have. When we consider that they have an experience, and again, it's not applicable in all situations, then it can help us lead to a more productive conversation.
It all makes sense. But when I read that, get curious about yourself, I thought it's really difficult because how do you avoid a bias about yourself? I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
we don't always see ourselves as others see us, right? So, and then as I read a little further, you talked about engaging in a fearless audit
Hmm.
was your term, I think. And so, how does one really get
Mm,
curious with themselves? How do you get
yeah.
rid of the bias?
I mean, you don't. Like, you can't get rid of the bias. You have to, but you do have to name and understand that it's there. And so that language has actually evolved. We call it courageous audits now. Because one of the ways that we do this work now is to invite people to think about what am I doing or not doing that's getting in the way? That's the courageous audit question,
Mhm,
always. And it's not to shame ourselves, it's not to blame ourselves, but it's so that we can maybe take a more honest reflection. And I lovingly tell people, and if you don't feel a little squirmy in your answers, then you're not answering honest enough. And it is hard. I mean, that's the confirmation bias, right? We have beautiful beliefs about who we are and how we show up in the world. And so I've found that, especially working with people that might not have as much skill or muscle build up, even just the question of what do you need that you're not getting right now, sometimes is enough to diffuse the heat
mhm,
so that they can enter into the conversation from like that higher thinking. Because instead of it just being like, well, I'm just mad at Linda because she's whatever, it's like, oh, I needed to be heard and I wasn't heard. And now I can like reclaim a little bit of my power. So even that question, like if there was one, that would be one
mhm,
of them. Like it would be those
mhm.
two. What do you need and what are you doing that might be getting in the way?
I appreciate that because I know that sometimes my husband will point out things that I don't know about myself.
Oh yeah. I mean, let's pause on that for a second, right? The true practice of self-awareness
Yeah,
that I subscribe to is how well
yeah,
do you know yourself and how well do you know how other people experience you?
yeah, yeah.
And boy, do our spouses know a lot about us.
Don't ask your
Or
husband.
partners or siblings or whoever.
Mhm,
I have a question in relation to what you've referenced about the fearless audit, and this has come up many times in my career. I really do want honest feedback, but I
Yeah.
struggle with where am I going to get that most objective, feedback to really make me, a more effective person, whatever it is that I'm seeking
Yeah.
feedback. People really struggle giving that type of feedback. What is your feedback on that piece?
My feedback on feedback.
Yeah, your feedback on feedback.
Okay, so my first one, Laura, is I want to lovingly push. You'll never get objective feedback. It's all subjective. So first is understanding that.
Right.
It's interesting because I have a different experience with feedback. I was telling Linda and Laura that my undergraduate degree, so before I got into the world of leadership development, was in theater performance and theater education. And when you're studying an art, you're getting feedback all the time.
Yeah.
Every single class you're performing and you're getting notes. We call them notes, right? You're getting notes not just from the teacher, but your peers. Every single rehearsal, that director is going page by page. Notes. Hey, Sarah, you missed this moment. I didn't really believe you were connected here. And and it was a jarring transition for me to go into the corporate world to see how uncomfortable people were with feedback. And I was like, oh, but like the show won't be good if you're not getting notes. So that's like the first thing I want to say. This is something I could talk about forever. Um, I we need to think about. I think about gathering feedback like gathering research. if we're generic in our ask, we're going to be generic in our receiving. It's like asking research questions, right? They call it garbage in, garbage out. And so one of the ways you can get, because I think, Laura, what I'm hearing, yeah, Juliana, you understand that from like from a dancing perspective. Like your point was off. You weren't right. You didn't hit your mark. You didn't. And it was just like, no, no, no. And we got it. But I think, Laura, when you say objective, what I hear you say is specific. Like I want specific feedback. And so the more specific we can be in our ask, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's I'm working on not interrupting people. Can you give me a time when whatever the case is. So that's one, be really specific about your ask. But even before that, actually, I find that most people, if you say, "Hey, I you are somebody I trust and value," and whether you want to say like, "I want you to ride shotgun with me or be my co-pilot, but would you be willing to be somebody who provides me feedback of when I'm showing up and when I'm not? Would you be open to that?" And
Mm-hmm.
that, like most people want to be helpful, and that gives permission for them. And then the trick for us, which is tricky, is that just like if our spouses call us out on something and you're like, no, not tonight, honey. Like how do you receive it? Because, and this is something I work on with leaders, is gathering feedback, whether it's through a survey or a 360 or informally, it's sort of not, I mean, that the information you gather is one piece of data. But what you're really doing is showing this person that they can say hard things to. And maybe that point of feedback that they're giving you in this moment isn't hard, but if I can make it safe, maybe the next one is going to be really important to me. So my
Mm-hmm.
like sort of simplified answer to that is ask somebody to be like really intentional about writing Copilot or writing shotgun with you.
Mm-hmm.
Be specific in your ask. And also another way we can think about it is some people are very comfortable telling us what we're doing that's missing the mark. But for a lot of people, especially those of us who manage people, it's very risky. I mean, even on my team, I work with colleagues that I look at as my peers, but at the end of the day, I control their wages, I control opportunities, I control their salaries. The power dynamic is very present. So I love asking the question, what should I continue doing or amplify? And what could I do new or differently? Because somebody giving me a solution is far less risky than pointing out a problem. But I get the same information. So that's
Mm-hmm.
like, that's what I have found to be more effective some of the time because humans are complicated.
Yes, we are. We're very complex. Thank you for that. That's enlightening and uh that's certainly actionable, right? Certainly
Yeah.
something that, yeah, I appreciate that. And hopefully the audience benefited from that. Linda, I'm going to turn it over to you.
I'll take it back.
Thank
I
you.
have more questions.
I know you do.
So,
I love being
from
ping pong between you two. This is such a gift.
from my own experience, when being curious about others, there is always and guilty as charged. There's always a risk we make assumptions,
Yeah.
excuses,
Yeah.
or tell our own story about them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you share some, you called them watch outs,
Mm.
to keep in mind as we're being curious about others?
Yeah.
And it gets harder as you've worked together longer.
Yeah.
So I had a business partner. She now owns the business I sold. I had a business partner for many years, and I wasn't being totally honest with her at the end
Mm.
because I was writing this story, right?
Yeah.
Didn't realize
Yeah.
that till I read the book. But
Yeah. It's I think this is I think this is harder than us like questioning ourselves a little bit, depending on who you are. There are some people I wish question themselves a little more. I always joke that the people with imposter syndrome usually are the
mhm.
ones who don't need it, and there's other people that I wish had just a little bit, just a little
Yeah,
bit of pause.
yeah.
But but I think there's a couple of watch outs that again I want to I want to repeat some and then expand on it. Our brain is our brain is built to make assumptions. Like
Mhm.
it's built to conserve energy, right? It's built to make leaps, to fill in the gaps. And so we have to understand that that's just part of the design of our brain so that we're not overwhelmed. And and to ask ourselves, is this like I like to ask the question, is this a rule about this person or just a possibility? And that actually can apply to projects and that can apply to teams. Like, is this a rule that this is who they are, or is this a possibility? Um, Now, there does come a point when someone's pattern is consistent enough that you go, I'm going to choose a different path with them because I'm not going to engage with them. I'm actually not going to have the conversation with them because the pattern has been such, right? I tend to lean on give people the benefit of the doubt, but I want to recognize that there are times where they've proven, like at least at this point in time with who they are and what you know about them, this is where they're at. I think it's really, really important for us to not excuse behavior because explaining behavior isn't the same as excusing it. I've never been a fan of people who apologize because they were did something terrible and they were busy. Like that was a choice you made. It explains it, but it doesn't excuse the behavior. So that like that I say that as a watch out again for us as women to make sure we don't let someone off the hook. Um, there's there can be incredible power in asking someone. I want to I love to think of it as an invitation. When actually like my colleague Dr. Teresa Peterson, she came up with this three-step model for starting a conversation. And the first is essentially like sentence one is what's kind of the point? Like what's the like what are we talking about? Hey, I want to talk to you about that meeting. Simple sentence. Um, the second is anchoring to something bigger than this conversation. And that what I mean by that is it could be, Linda, I respect you a ton and I realize that I haven't been truthful with you. It could
Mhm.
be, you know what I know, Patty, is you and I both want to do a really good job. We just see it very differently. So we're trying to anchor the conversation to something bigger than this moment. And then it's the ask. Would you be open to having a conversation about this and this? I feel like there are absolutely times when people are unwilling or unable to have the conversation we hope for. 100%. We all have it, right? You get hangry, you're tired, you're irritable, hormonal. God bless us. We just go through a whole, you know.
Mhm.
Sorry, I'm having a moment because somebody once was like calling me a girl. I was like, I'm not a girl. My ovaries are dying over here. I don't know like who you're talking to, but please continue on. No, but where was I? That's my ADHD at 5 o'clock at night, my time. But what I find is when we can come from a genuine deep place of curiosity, like most people will meet that moment. Not always. And the thing that's true. So Linda, to your point about your colleague, there's this concept called family dynamic theory. I like
Mhm.
nerding out on like yeah. So family dynamic theory. And the best way to explain it is the people you are in relationship with the longest, whether it's family member, spouse, coworkers, you develop the longest patterns with. It's why you can be
Mhm.
a soon to be 44-year-old woman and for whatever reason I can act like a little 16-year-old with my parents because that's the pattern.
Mhm.
And think of it like those old school baby mobiles that would hang, right? And when you pull on one side, the rest of the pieces like toys bounce and you pull on this one. So I'm using that as an analogy because family dynamic theory would say that I get used to your bounce, Juliana, and you get used to my bounce, and we just keep bouncing in the same way. And one of the things that happens actually is when we start to show up differently or bounce differently, it can actually cause an initial reaction of distrust because
Mhm.
people are like, what are you doing? Why are you bouncing differently? Why did you ask this? So even if you come from a place of genuine curiosity and like, I am really trying to repair this, I really care about you. If that is not our normal pattern, it's not uncommon for people to be skeptical about that. Does that make sense? And you've probably have experienced
Absolutely.
that.
Yes. Yeah, it makes total sense.
I have a really
Yeah.
good example of that. When I graduated from my coaching at Royal Roads back in 2008, I would catch myself coaching my husband, and he would always get defensive because
Yeah.
it was a new pattern, right? It
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
and he was just pushing back all the time. Very, yeah,
Yeah.
personal story. Yeah.
It's not uncommon. I always warn, I don't mean this to be gendered, but like I often warn my like male CEOs when we're working on listening differently. Like, don't be surprised if your spouse is like, what the hell's wrong with you? Why are
Mhm.
you listening to me in this way? What'd you do? Right?
Yeah.
Which is what
Yeah.
always happens. Like, not always, but
Yeah.
often they'll come back to me the next day, like, Sarah, I did what you, I like, I made observation statements. I was listening, and she was just like, what'd you do, buddy? What happened?
Yeah. Well, and I think Juliana has a question now, and we can open
Yeah.
the floor up to more questions too for everyone.
Oh, you're on mute, my dear. And
Mute.
there
I
you go.
wasn't sure if we're allowed to ask, but
Yeah.
specifically with what you shared there,
Mm.
I'm curious. One, Linda, I feel like they should preface that in coaching programs in schools, like because that I was like, oh my gosh, that happened, and I finished coaching school. All of a sudden, you want to coach everyone.
And they're like,
But
don't do your stuff on me, Sarah. So now
yes,
I have to ask, are you curious what I would ask you if I was working with you, or do you just want me to listen and agree?
yeah, yeah. So I was what I was curious about in what you were sharing about the bounce and when you
Mm,
start bouncing
yeah.
different, initially trust can be disrupted.
Yeah.
How do you respond to that or how do you approach that? Because often I know I actually am consciously intending to bounce a bit different.
Yeah.
So when
Yeah.
we know that we're doing that or we're coaching people to bounce a bit differently, how do you support them to manage that? And, you know, yeah, I'm not answering a full question there, but how
No,
do you,
I love fragmented sentences. It's literally how my brain operates. So I got you,
yeah,
Juliana.
I'm
So
feeling you. I'm like, I think she's going to get me.
yeah. So sometimes it can be really helpful just to be transparent with people. So one of the things I'm working on is I'm really working on asking more questions and not just jumping to giving you solutions, especially working with managers, right?
Yeah,
One of the things I'm working on is slowing myself down. And so you might see this.
yeah.
Because sometimes what can happen is people will be like, I see what you're doing. Look at you practicing your little coaching. But the other thing is the thing that moves it to something that can be trustworthy is consistency. You know,
Yeah.
one of the, and so like that's the thing that I often tell people is like, and this could be true both if it feels like unnatural or awkward for the observer, but for some people it's just like, oh, but this doesn't feel authentic. And I was like, I know because it's new. But like at some point it can become who you are and how you approach things, right? But the other things, oh, I had another thought. Hold on. Oh, shoot. Oh, my brain just glitched. And I think it might have been really good. You were asking about showing up differently. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. So, one of my favorite definitions of trust is from the Gottman Institute. And they describe trust as I can count on you to consider me and my needs and right to consider me in the equation while you're also considering you. Untrustworthiness, which is on the opposite end of the spectrum of trust, separate spectrum, is I can count on you to not think of me while you're thinking about yourself.
Can you say both of those again?
Yeah. The reason I had a brain glitch, it was 2 nights ago at 3 a.m. because I was working on research and got really excited and was writing this article. So this is good for me. So the trust continuum is I can count on you to consider me while you're also considering yourself, right? That's kind of the simplest form of trust. Untrustworthiness is I can count on you to not consider me while you're considering what you need or what you're going to do. Then the third layer is betrayal, which is I can count on you to do whatever you want to do, even if it costs me. And you know that it'll cost me, essentially, like I'm summarizing. But the reason I bring that up is because when we're showing up differently, we're changing and we're pushing against that narrative of what people have gotten used to counting on us for. I can count, good, bad, or otherwise. I struggle with my ADHD. Unfortunately, a story people have about me is I can count on Sarah to turn in things at the very last minute. I'm trying to work on that, right? And so I like that language to also like, what do you want the story to be now? Like what, and the way that you're going to do that is just being really consistent. Was that helpful from a standpoint of like the question behind the question or the situation you were imagining? So transparency, potentially, if it makes sense to say I'm working on this, and then consistency.
Yeah, the consistency it just hit the mark completely.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because I think that what came up for me there was like, oh yeah, there you are on another thing
Yeah.
you're trying to do, and I know
Yeah.
you're not going
Yeah.
to finish it. I know you're not going to do it. So
Mhm.
like, how many roller coasters do I need to go around? It's like the new fad diet,
Yeah.
the new tool. Oh, now I'm just going to be your guinea pig or your thing, and then I'm going to have to go through your roller coaster of you like shaming yourself for not getting it. So like, here we go.
Oh, I talk about that in the book. I have a very technical term for that. It's called a shame boomerang. You ready?
Oh, I love that. I should make a t-shirt.
So I have so many t-shirts, so do not encourage that. We're trying to sell some off.
The piece that I often, so I don't know if this is a tool used, but I'll let my clients like use me as them, like tell them, you can let them know you're working with a coach.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
could even include,
100%.
you tell
Yeah.
them you like let them
Blame
know you're
me
working in a
for
coaching
your weird
session and
behavior.
this came up, so blah 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 blah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
then that can be like a validating, like I didn't just read this,
Yeah.
in a meme on Instagram and
It
think I should do it.
it also I think it's important for people to depending on what it is, right? Like that's always
Mhm.
my it depends. Like that's another t-shirt I want. It depends. Is like you might explain why. I recognize that I really struggle with interrupting, so you're going to see me count to 10 before I respond. Like because that also is like displaying intellectual humility and people respond to that. Respond to somebody who's like I'm doing this because I recognize I want to get better at it or I'm not great at it. And so that's something else for people to try, which can feel very risky, especially when we're working with people who are used to power and authority. Yeah.
It's
Uh,
interesting because just owning up and saying I'm working with a coach is
yeah,
transparency. Full,
exactly.
and that builds trust, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Transparency builds
For
trust.
for most
Yeah.
people it does. For
Yeah.
most team members appreciate that.
Yeah.
Unless you have a situation like I do, where I'm pretty sure he's got a narcissistic person on his team that probably just shouldn't be there, but that's not my job to tell him. Um, Joanna had a question. Do you want me to hop into
Yeah.
the chat?
Joanna?
Joanna, yeah. Do you want to come on and chat or do you want me just to respond to the question that you shared?
Oh, no, sure, that's fine. So the question that I'm asking about is how do you start these conversations when you feel that the person is not really trustworthy? Like if given the opportunity, say in a team situation,
Yeah.
that you share and then they turn around and use that and then kind of wall you out of it.
Again, this is where such a great question. Also, I'm really sorry that you've experienced this. Like, I just want to name, you're
You.
either living it, is that fair?
I am, yes. So right now there is a situation that's like that, and I've tried a couple times to kind of have um, conversations, not actually addressing, hey, I feel like this is what you're doing,
Yeah.
um, but kind of approaching it from the way of I'm doing this, you're doing that, and if you would have said this to me, then I could have saved a lot of time and a lot of work because we're both doing the same thing here, only it's in my lane and you're kind of veering into my lane and doing things that are supposed to be in my lane.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, there's a couple of like language, there's pieces of language you just used that you could articulate it. Like,
Mhm.
um, I'm just like uh, going off the top of my head of like, it could look like, hey, I mean, it could look like, hey, can we talk about whatever specific situation where there was like cross-pollination,
Mhm.
right? Where lines got crossed of like, hey, one of the things I know about you is like you're really whatever. It's got to be true and honest. Don't say it if it isn't. But I can tell that there are times when we're overlapping. Would you be open to a conversation to get really clear so we both feel good about it? What I love about the language of would you be open to is almost no one would want to say they're not open-minded.
Right.
So it's not manipulative because they do have an out. You are giving them consent, but that would be one thing. You also could like raise the heat a little bit and go, I don't know how you're feeling, but I've been struggling with how we're working together. And I'm wondering if we could talk about it so we both feel good.
Well, this is how I'm trying to go about
Yeah.
handling it is I've said, hey, I'm kind of pulling together a list of people that will be working in this realm so that we can have a meeting and everybody can put everything on the table so that we're not duplicating work. So
Yeah.
I kind of put it like that.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a bit of a nudge event. And if a nudge works to get the conversation, then perfect. But if you
well,
try that and if it doesn't, it didn't.
you this wasn't very nice, but I'll tell y'all anyway. But this person was on a meeting the other day, and I happened to be walking past when she was coming out, and I could tell that she was a little upset. And I asked her if she was okay, and so she starts venting off and telling me what what these other people on the meeting are doing, which is what she's doing.
Mm.
And I didn't say anything. I just listened to her and let her say what she needed to say and told her I'm sorry you're going through this. And then but I was thinking in my mind, how does that feel? Because that's
Yeah.
exactly what
Yeah.
you've been doing, and
Yeah.
now somebody's doing it to you and you're having an issue with it and venting off about it. So
That can actually
I
could be
didn't
your
say
that
that,
could
but that's kind of how I
wow.
was like, wow.
That could be your door in when it happens again to say,
Mm,
"Hey, I know," or you know, like sometimes I like language. I don't think this was your intention, but you know what you experienced? I just experienced that with you.
right.
That could be a door in.
Oh, that would have been good.
Hindsight, we're all amazing communicators when it's not our situations. Let's just be clear. But you can have it in your back pocket, Joanna, which is part of
Right.
what I think, like, that's part of having higher quality conversations is thinking about moments where you get stuck typically and go, what might be my strategy? So let's take it further. And I'm going to share with you one of my favorite, this was from my therapist, and it's one of my favorite phrases. Let's say she does something that feels very overtly disrespectful, right? Just
Hmm.
just ask this question. How did you want me to feel when you said that? How did you want me to feel when you did that? And then don't say anything more. But be like genuine. Like I just like how did you want me to feel when you said that? Because for people who didn't intend that, almost always their reaction is, "Oh my God, that's not at all what I intended." Or, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was really stressed about blah, 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 blah." But it's like just a loving mirror. And if you're making the observation back and they did intend, like what I find is that often people will get quiet,
Mm.
but it's a way
Yeah.
of holding some accountability when you know when it's like it's sharp and you're like, God, was that sharp? Did they mean for that to be sharp? You know, I think they did. I don't know. Let's test the assumption. What did you want me to feel when you said that?
I find it hard, like you were talking in the beginning, the I guess like in my family, there are certain things that I guess avoidance is how I've dealt with through the
Yeah.
family through the years.
Yeah.
Um, so not wanting to confront it head on, I don't have a problem with asking questions, but when it comes to that where you just need to put it out there bluntly, that's where I kind of
Mm.
I'm not confrontational. I'm not
Yeah.
a confrontational type person. I'm very go with the flow, and this person seems to be more controlling, and I want the shine all on me,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is fine with me because I'm one of those that I don't want the spotlight. I'd rather be in the background doing the innovation and the here, do this, and then somebody else can go up front and do it.
Sure. I hear that. Here's my invitation. That question doesn't have to be confrontational. It can be very genuine. It could come from a place of confusion. I'm sorry. How did you want me to feel when you said that? Or another way you could say it, I just want to check in. What was your intention there? And again, like simple and leave it because it's a like it people will clarify, right? Or they'll
Mhm.
reflect, which both are a win-win. Yeah.
Right.
And so like I hear you because I'm the same way or I was. And like the only thing that I would say is like our avoidance, our people pleasing, our wanting to keep the peace
Right.
has served us and has also not served us. And so you get to decide, am I okay with the cost that I'm having to pay by not speaking up? You know, and especially like I say this lovingly on this call, as far as I can tell, most of us are white presenting, right? Like that's very much a kind of a white female perspective of this desire to be liked
Hmm.
over respected. And so
Right.
like so that's just my loving push, right? Is like there are times where you go, you know what, it's just not worth it. But again, I want it to come from a place of being like power within instead of powerless. But there's so many
Right.
other like brilliant people on here who might have
I
different
want to,
perspectives.
well, and I do want to interrupt because Patty's had her hand
Yeah,
up
she
forever.
has.
She must be getting
Huh.
tired.
See,
Yeah.
Juliana
Thanks,
is
Joanna.
saying that
No,
she has something similar going on there with somebody she's working with.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah,
no,
thank
I
you.
apologize. I want to make sure that sort of we've wrapped around with Joanna because I was
Yeah,
going to go on a bit of a different
let's
Thank
take a
you.
thing
pivot.
here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just a couple of quick things. So I like the comment around curiosity, and I use that a lot with my team at work, not necessarily around sort of difficult conversations, but just in general. Like, let's be
Yeah,
curious, right?
yeah,
Like, let's
yeah.
let's ask questions. Let's be curious. But the piece around being curious about the other person, right? And it's not about assumptions. It's
Hmm.
more on the empathy side. And again, we
Hmm.
all want to be empathetic, and I hope I am, and I try and teach my kids to be, what's that other person feeling, and all of that. And you still slip into the assumptions, right? As
Yeah,
much as you're trying to be
yeah,
empathetic, you realize, oh wait,
Mm.
or you don't even realize it, right? You're making
yeah.
assumptions. So thank you for that reminder. That's really important, right? And then the other thing I wanted to talk about was what you said about like authentic and testing things,
Hmm.
right? And I fall into that a lot when it comes to coaching or therapy or whatever. It's like, well, do this or try this. I'd be like, oh, I'd like to, but that's not me.
Mm.
Well, how do I know it's not me if I don't try it, right? So,
Hmm.
So
and if I say,
true.
A
right,
beautiful catch. Like
and if I
beautiful
say I'd
awareness.
like to be like that, that kind of means that maybe it is me and try. So giving ourselves the freedom to try it and not feel
Yeah,
you're being inauthentic, right? So
yeah,
I appreciated that comment because that's one I struggle with. I always want to be authentic, and if I'm testing something doesn't mean I'm not.
yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, like when we think about, my husband and I, we were just talking about this after our virtual event this afternoon. We have such a desire as humans, I think, to want things to be simple.
Mhm.
And the reality is, when we're talking about behavior change, when we're talking about working with other humans, when we're talking
Yeah.
about, right, like anything that involves beliefs, habits, rituals, any of
People.
that, people, it's going to require
Yeah.
experimentation because it's
Mhm.
complex. And so it's like, how do we embrace an experimentation mindset? I wanted to say one
Thank you.
quick thing, though, going back to the getting curious about other people that I didn't say. I can get curious about someone. I can seek to understand them and not agree with them.
Very
I can
true.
seek to understand them and hear them and still disagree. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Right.
Like
Right.
sometimes I think, again, like that's a confusion of like,
Right.
oh, now I just have to agree with her position. Like I can understand you and
Yeah.
have a different perspective.
Mhm.
Yeah. But also like Patty, what a beautiful catch on your part of like,
Mhm.
yeah, sometimes I've created, again, I lovingly say, is it a rule or is it a possibility? Is it a rule that this is
Yes.
true or not?
Where's
It's
the
just
possibility? Ask it
it's
about
just a
yourself as
possibility.
well, not just
Yeah.
others. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
This is
Great.
like one of my favorite coaching questions when I see somebody really stuck. Like, well, I could never do that. I don't know. Is that a rule or is that just a
Yeah.
possibility?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great.
Michelle, my
Thank you.
fellow debuker. Thanks, Patty. We found out for people who were on like late, Michelle and I were born in the same
Yeah.
city in
Yeah.
Iowa. It's so bizarre, but we'll talk about that later, Michelle.
Yes. I think for me, one of the experiences in it, and I think having gone like I think before most people joined, my parents are elderly and my mom's in hospice, and things have really shifted for our family. And there's four siblings. Um, so there's definitely been a shift in our patterns of behavior.
Yeah.
Um, and also just the heaviness of the situation, the
Yeah.
fact that, roles are being reversed, all of those things, there can be such emotion attached to it. And I think in the past, what I would normally do if I was coming onto a conversation that I knew I had to have, I would sometimes avoid it. I will be very honest, but there would be
Mhm.
times when I would hold myself off from having that conversation because I didn't want the emotion
Yeah.
in it. And yet
Yeah.
it felt like I was delaying and I was missing the whole point of
Yeah.
addressing something. And I think anything you got to say about
Yeah. No,
that?
one, like I'm dancing in that space right now.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's a great quote by Douglas Stone, Sheila Heen, and I can't think of the third author. That is, difficult conversations are don't just include emotions; they are at their very core about emotions.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they're like moments of truth,
Yeah,
right? They're
they
they're
are.
they're deep.
And so I don't know how this will land with you, but so often we see people have this unrealistic expectation of what a successful conversation looks like, and it's one without emotion, and it's one that's comfortable. And part of getting really good, and I say this to you also, Joanna, part of becoming a little bit more comfortable is getting comfortable with the discomfort. It's
Right.
sitting with the emotions. Now, a really important practice is of like being able to emotionally regulate ourselves because we can't control the other person. And that becomes also trickier as people age because we all, if we are fortunate to live long enough, our brains will shrink, which means we're going to lose like things that, I mean, there is just a fundamental structural change in our brain if we are, again, are fortunate enough to live long enough. Um, and also like there's a little bit of I think what I'm curious about is like, and what are the emotions telling you? You know, like what's the truth in the emotions? It's kind of like when if somebody cries, people are so quick to apologize. And for me, I always go like they're just there because something's important. So what are the tears telling us? Right?
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that I wonder about, and I don't know for you, but this is something I'm working on, is genuinely trying to ask, what do you need right now in this space? Because some people age with confidence, some people age with anxiety. I'm dealing with the latter and a
Yeah.
lot of sadness and anticipatory grief.
Yeah.
And then I'm also dealing with anticipatory grief,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And um and so like you'll n- I don't I just really firmly believe, and I've seen this in our work, that when something matters, you're never going to not have emotion about it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But what I might invite you is how do I want to show up? Like the question that I've been asking myself a lot lately and asking clients who've been going through a lot of changes because of all the economic uncertainty is like, what do you always want to be true about yourself? So like, what do I want to be true about myself in this conversation? Right? Like just to anchor you
Yeah.
so that you're like, don't worry about getting washed away by the emotions. Like what's going to be true? Because some conversations, what needs to be true is I need to hold steady. I need to stand firm,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
others, I need to be more compassionate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. No,
Mhm.
thank you. I
I
appreciate
I need to interrupt this
Oh,
because
is it
we are
time? Linda,
past
are you putting the
time.
like putting the
I
shepherd's
am.
hook on our
Yeah.
conversation today?
We said at the beginning, the biggest challenge is being in the hour, right?
Yeah.
And I just want to share with Michelle and with the others. Juliana posted earlier in the chat. It's about deeply resting in true curiosity when the question is asked.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the secret.
Yeah.
Is if you're feeling true curiosity,
Yeah.
it's not blame or resentment or it's just true curiosity. People feel that.
Can I tell one quick story? And I
Sure.
promise it'll be 90 seconds and
Yeah.
it'll be
And
worth
if
it.
people need to leave, we understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously we have this phrase chronically curious. I brought my mug. My sister was wearing one of my sisters was wearing one of our chronically curious shirts when she went out to Washington, D.C. And she and her family were at the Holocaust Museum and they had the privilege of meeting a survivor. And he saw her shirt and he was like, "Oh, I like your shirt." And she was like, "Oh, it's my sister. It's her company. She's really big on curiosity." And he said the most profound thing that like is seared into my heart. He said, curiosity is the greatest gift you can give someone because you tell them they're worthy to be known.
Oh,
Wow.
And that goes back to like when we're deeply resting in true curiosity, right? And
Mhm.
that's hard when we're upset and frustrated.
Yeah.
And that's may not always be the place that we need to be. We might need to come from a place of confidence and clarity, you know? But yeah, I just wanted to
I'm a
share
little
that.
distracted because my computer is going to die.
die.
Oh
Oh
yeah, the
dear.
technology gods always
Oh
have to
dear.
come and get me at some point.
Um, but I do want to thank everybody for this time. And I have
Yeah.
one last question for Sarah, if I might, if you've
Yeah.
got time.
Hmm.
I'm wondering what you're looking forward to in 2025. Like what comes next for you? Are you talking about writing another book?
Yeah. Yeah. The thing that is like lighting my soul up is repair, is just really exploring the idea of repair, particularly in the workplace. Um, what does that look like? What does organizational repair look like? How do we get better at it? Because that's it's the natural, I don't want to say consequence, it's the natural evolution of the elephant's work.
Yeah.
Is the conversation I see people not having the most is one of repair. And so that is what keeps me up at 3 a.m. researching and turning over to my husband going, "Nick, I have this new idea. There's this connection. It makes me think of this." And he's like, "Shh, it's
Oh,
midnight."
I love your energy. Love your energy.
He just
So
quiet. He's like,
thank you everybody for today. It was just a great conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Thank you, Sarah, for all
"Oh,
your
thank
wisdom and
you."
your generosity and your sharing of personal stories as well. It was lovely. So if you enjoyed the conversation today as an audience, we do this monthly. We invite you to check out our website, see who's next. It's been the most fulfilling journey of my entire career is hosting conversations like this for everyone to learn and grow. So we hope you're just as excited about 2025 and the growth that you're going to be experiencing. And we hope you come back. So thank you for joining and have a great time